All right, in his first State of the Nation address after the May elections, President Cyril Ramaphosa decried the fact that the early childhood education system was not sufficiently equipping learners to read for understanding. Let's take a look at this clip.
We should also tackle one other important area, which is education, where we say in the next 10 years we want a South Africa which has better educational outcomes, and that every 10-year-old in our country will be able to read for meaning.
So we're joined in the studio. We had already started the conversation by the Chief Executive Officer of the National Education Collaboration Trust, Mr. Khosa. And as we were having our conversation, maybe just to recap a bit, I was asking why after all these years there are still these inefficiencies to be pointed out in our education system when seemingly there's so much effort being put into improving the education system.
So reading is one of those, areas that we've had problems with, for years. But we've reconfirmed in the past, 2 years that a greater proportion of our learners can read for meaning. But that's more of a societal challenge than just a school, problem. Earlier on, I said that kids must be able to decode text, but over and above that, they must be able to extract meaning. In addition to that, they must enjoy reading, and they must read for leisure and for fulfillment and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, we're a society that, in which very few people actually read.
Yeah.
So we don't read at those, higher levels that I have, pointed to. But the National Education Collaboration Trust has actually taken cues from the President. And in fact, we've designed with other players in the reading space, the National Reading Coalition. As the name denotes, it's about getting people who work in that space to work together. And I must tell you that we have lots of people who work in the reading space. But unfortunately, the coordination is too weak. We're stamping on top of each other, we're leaving big gaps, we're doing stuff that's not sustainable, doesn't go to greater depth, and so on. So this coordination seeks to link up these, various, activities that are happening across the country so that we can go to depth, so that we can be consistent, so that we can achieve something that is sustainable. As a result, some of the pillars of the National Reading Coalition are that as a country, let's start with 25% of the schools that are located in 25% of the circuits. We have about 1,000 circuits in the country, and if we can work intensively, all of us in those circuits, we'll get somewhere, and we'll evaluate and see how far we've gone. And this initiative, hangs around three important things: partnerships, setting targets, and in fact breaking the glass wall between governmental and non-governmental initiatives.
Yeah.
And we can do those in those dedicated spaces and focusing on key areas that we think will have higher leverage. And if I can mention them, 6 areas. 1, how we prepare our teachers to teach reading right from university.
So this is from training?
From training. As they get into university, we must actually, in a very clear manner, train them on how to teach reading once they leave the universities. Secondly,
you'd imagine that is what is being done anyway.
So,
as a matter of course.
Well, unfortunately not. There are patches
seemingly not.
There are patches of those programs across the country. Some universities do it, others don't. But generally, even if they do, for instance, they teach you how to teach mother tongue in English. So we want to change those sorts of things. But we're very happy that organizations such as Joint Education Trust, the JET Education Services, and the Higher Education Department have done a landscape profiling of what's happening and where we can close the gaps and so on. It's those kind of programs that we want to network.
So these elements you're talking about, are they incorporated into the National Reading Initiative?
They're incorporated in the National Reading Initiative. So the first area I mentioned is that preparation of teachers. The second one is actually helping the 433,000 teachers who are already in the system. All of them have to be helped to know how to teach reading. The NECT has reached about 90,000 of those teachers.
Yep.
The third one is that we've got to put in front of each learner, young people, age and language relevant material for them to read. They're not going to learn how to read if they don't have material.
There must be a difficult challenge, though, in the age of 4IR, where children have access to whatever they want to online.
So 4IR and gadgets and so on are competing with the book, that we know.
Absolutely.
But it's not the book that we married to. We married to the content. So one of the things that we have to do under that focus area.
So access can be on any platform?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the key there will be that we need to have like more Shangaan stories written, for instance.
Yeah.
So how those get, provided in which platform, even more, let's have them, run from an IT, platforms. But beyond that, we need to have community support reading. So it can't only be teachers who teach reading in the classrooms. The teachers themselves must read. The principals themselves must read. The mothers and the fathers must read. The local authority must promote reading, so that we have a thick mesh of activities that promote reading in each of these circuits. We have to do policy, we have to do monitoring and evaluation, so that all in all, out of these 6 areas, we have a comprehensive response to a big challenge in the country.
So we're having this conversation at the same time that the country is celebrating Heritage Month, and the theme this year ties in with the UNESCO Declaration of encouraging indigenous languages. How are you going to incorporate this aspect?
So the incorporation of indigenous languages, run from like informal, less structured activities to highly structured activities like let's have more books written in our languages and encourage our kids to read the books and so on. But the most informal and the most practical ways of doing this thing, sit down and share a story in your own language with your child. That encourage it's the bedrock to reading, but even more importantly, it allows us as adults to pass on this heritage from one generation to the other, and we take it light. And so
but you have more
lost.
control of what happens in the schools than you do of what happens in the home.
So I mean, that's an understanding that we have been made to embrace. Education must not happen in the school only.
I mean, as the trust.
So the
area of control is more in the schools.
So let me say, the learners and the teachers are more organized in the schools, and they are less organized in the households and the communities and so on. But we do need to get to those households and communities, and that's why we are actually getting people into this coalition to get into traditional authorities, into churches, into clinics and so on, because this reading revolution has to be supported from the community.
So take us through some of the programs that you are running, and a person watching now and thinking, I really would like to get involved. How do they go about that? So
firstly, we have identified 25% of the circuits in the country, which house about 325 schools or so, and we're saying each one of us, in fact the 325 schools is the inner core. The outer core is about 5,000 schools. So we're saying in those identified 25% of the circuits, let's identify them, let's recognize them as hotspots. So all of us must go in there, provide a book, help a child to read. The church must run some reading, corner in the church. The teachers must organize themselves into reading clubs and so on. The president himself wants to set up his reading circles, which will start in some of these areas and so on, so that we have this reading revolution run from outside the school and right into the classrooms within the education institutions.
So have you started rolling it out? Community involvement? What sort of support do you require from the community?
So we have started rolling it out. In each of those 6 areas, we've profiled who is working where and how can we connect the various players across the national landscape. For instance, in the preparation of teachers, where we're working with universities. Yeah. In the teacher training space, the Department of Basic Education is actually leading that. Yeah. So we're working with the Department of Education, and we've reached about 20,000 teachers in that respect with the ETDP SETA, which is providing a whole lot of support there. Community activities, I'm sure you know about Nali Bali, so we work with Nali Bali and other community activities, organizations like Activate and so on, who are helping to talk to youth and parents.
Okay, Mr. Khosa, we can't compete with the president, so we're going to have to thank you for coming through, but it's an ongoing conversation. Absolutely. We hope that you will continue to come in to update us on what is happening. Let's go.